Hello everyone! In today's video we are going to talk about some of the major islands of Indonesia. Now, Indonesia has tens of thousands of islands, and obviously I'm not going to cover all of them in this video, but I do want to provide a brief overview of some of the more important islands. So this video is going to focus on the 7 most important islands, in my opinion, of the Indonesian archipelago. Okay, so we are going to start off with the most western island on this list, which is Sumatra. Now, Sumatra is the third largest island of Indonesia, and its population is about 50 million. It's got a few major cities, most notably Medan with a population of over 2 million, and Palembang with a population of 1.4 million. Sumatra is also home to the city of Banda Aceh, which is located in the Aceh province on the northern section of the island. This city is prominent because it was devastated by the 2004 tsunami, which killed about 225,000 people in over 14 countries. Alright, so now I want to move on to some of the more important geological formations on the island. First, we have Lake Toba, which is a lake inside of a caldera of a supervolcano. It's over 500 meters deep, and it is the largest volcanic lake in the world. The next geologic formation I want to talk about is Krakatoa, which is technically an island of itself, but it is geographically administered by the island of Sumatra. Krakatoa is one of the deadliest supervolcanoes in the world, and it is still active, which means that it could potentially blow up at any given time. The most famous eruption was in 1883, which generated a new island called Anak Krakatau, which means Child of Krakatoa. This eruption was the second deadliest in all of recorded history, and 36,000 people died. Krakatoa has also had some other minor eruptions in the past few centuries, but none of them were quite as deadly as the most famous one, which killed 36,000 people. Alright, and since Indonesia is a very volcanic country, many of the islands in Indonesia have volcanoes on them. There are, of course, more volcanoes to talk about, but Lake Toba and Krakatoa are the most prominent and the most important. So I also want to talk about some of the history behind the island of Sumatra. Now, several empires have colonized the archipelago of Indonesia. You had the Majapahit, you had the Sunda, you have, the Dutch came in towards, I think, the 1600s, but I might be wrong about that. But on Sumatra, the most important empire was the Srivijayan Empire. The Srivijayan Empire controlled the Strait of Malacca, which was crucial for Indian Ocean trade. Ships had to pass through the Strait of Malacca to reach China and Vietnam, so the Srivijayan Empire was able to tax any ship that went through its ports, and therefore they became very rich because of this. Because there was so much mercantile trade in the Srivijayan Empire, it actually became a huge catalyst for spreading Buddhism in the 8th and 9th centuries. Now, the Srivijayan Empire only lasted for about 5 centuries, but it was still integral in both the historical and cultural development of Indonesia, and especially the island of Sumatra. Alright, so the next island I want to talk about is Java. Now, Java is the 5th largest island of Indonesia, but it has a population of 141 million people. The island is very overpopulated and is home to most of the major cities of Indonesia. These cities include Jakarta, which is the capital and has a population of 9.6 million, Surabaya, which has a population of 2.7 million, Bandung, which has a population of 2.4 million, Bekasi, which has a population of 2.6 million, Semarang, which has a population of 1.5 million, Tangerang, which has a population of 1.7 million, and Depok, which has a population of 1.8 million. There are plenty of cities on the island of Java that have a large population, but those are the major ones. So geologically, just like Sumatra, Java is home to many volcanoes. One of the most prominent is Mount Bromo, which is an active volcano in eastern Java. There's also a lot of history and culture emanating from the island. There are several famous temples on the island, like Borobudur, which is a Mahayana Buddhist temple from the 9th century. There's also Mendut, which is another 9th century Buddhist temple. And there is Prambanan, which is probably the most famous temple on the island, and it is a Hindu temple, also from the 9th century. Java was also the center of government for the Majapahit Empire, which ruled from about the 1200s to the 1400s. The Majapahit Empire was able to unite the entire Indonesian archipelago thanks to Gajah Mada, who you will probably recognize if you've ever played Civilization V. So there's a lot of history emanating from this island, and most of the modern culture of Indonesia today derives from the island of Java or from the Majapahit Empire. Alright, the next island I want to talk about is Borneo. Now, in Indonesian, it's called Kalimantan, but in English, it's called Borneo, so I will refer to it as Borneo. But there's not really a lot to say about this island anyway. It's the second largest island in Indonesia, and it has a population of 19 million. The island is shared by three countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. This island is still largely underdeveloped. There aren't a whole lot of economic opportunities here, and it is still largely untouched by civilization. An interesting piece of news about this island, though, is that the capital of Indonesia might be moving to this island in the next 10 years. As I mentioned previously when I was talking about Java, the capital of Indonesia is Jakarta, but because Jakarta is kind of a smaller island and they don't really have a lot of room to expand, the government of Indonesia is actually considering moving the capital to Borneo. He's probably doing this for two reasons. One, so that the capital of Indonesia actually has room to expand as it grows, because not only is Jakarta on the small island of Java, but so are those other 10 cities that I mentioned. And the other reason for moving the capital is probably to instantiate some economic opportunities for the people on the island of Borneo. And there are probably some other reasons as well. Maybe the government of Indonesia wants to have more cultural and more political dominance on the island of Borneo since it is shared by three different countries. Alright, now I want to talk about the island of Bali, which is a very small island in Indonesia, but it is still very significant. Its population is 4.2 million, and it is a very popular tourist destination. Most people who visit Indonesia will visit the island of Bali and will likely stay in the city of Denpasar. Because the island is so small, there really aren't a whole lot of historically significant sites, but one of the most prominent is Goa Gajah, which is a cave that became famous due to its ancient carvings, and these carvings represent Hindu gods. Another notable site in Bali is Puratana Lot, which is the temple of ancient Hindu pilgrimage. The next island we will be talking about is Celebes, which in Indonesian is called Sulawesi, but since it's called Celebes in English, I will be calling it Celebes. Celebes is the fourth largest island of Indonesia, and it has a population of 17.3 million. The largest city is Makassar, which has a population of 1.3 million. Just like Borneo, Celebes is very underdeveloped, and there's really not a whole lot going on the island. I actually don't really have anything else to say about the island because there's not a whole lot going on. But I wanted to mention it because it's very large and it does have a large population, so it is somewhat significant to the archipelago of Indonesia. The next island I will talk about is Timor. Now, Timor is not a very significant island. It only has a population of 1.2 million, and it's also very small in area. But the reason why I want to mention Timor is because it is shared by two countries. Half of it belongs to Indonesia, and the other half belongs to East Timor or Timor-Leste. The country of Timor-Leste actually belonged to Portugal until 1975 when it gained its independence, but 9 days after it gained its independence, Indonesia decided to invade. Indonesia held on to the island until 2002, and after much backlash from the people of East Timor, they decided to give it its independence. Besides a slight amount of historical significance, Timor doesn't really play a very prominent role in Indonesia, not economically, not culturally, not politically, not geographically. It's just a small island that has an interesting bit of history behind it. The last island I will be talking about on this list is New Guinea. New Guinea is the largest island in Indonesia and is the second largest island in the entire world. The population is 8 million and it is shared by Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. Many of the tribes on the island of New Guinea are still in the fifth world. Many of them are still hunter-gatherer, and a lot of them have very limited access to the outside world. The Indonesian part of this island is also very underdeveloped. Many of the people who live there are tribal, and many of them do not have access to solid economic opportunities. The largest mountain on this island is Puncak Jaya, which is also the largest mountain in Australasia. It's also important to note that geologically, the island of New Guinea is part of Oceania and not part of Asia. So the people who live on this island are often put in the same category as Australians, New Zealanders, Tongans, Fijians, etc., etc. There are of course several other islands we could mention in this video, such as Halmahera or Seram, and maybe I'll make a video about those islands in the future, but for now I wanted to give you guys a brief overview of some of the main islands of the Indonesian archipelago. Thank you for watching, please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next week.